Let's talk about sex. Seriously. There's this constant pressure, right? This cultural anxiety that tells couples in long-term relationships that you have to be having a certain amount of it in a certain way just to prove your relationship is healthy. It feels so many articles and advice columns, but what if we're all completely missing the point? What if this whole focus on frequency is just asking the wrong question? Let's dig into the science and see what really matters.
Ah, yes, this question. It's the one that just haunts so many relationships, you know? We're always trying to measure ourselves against some invisible, perfect standard. But before we even try to answer that, let's take a look at what the data says is actually happening behind closed doors. Get this. According to major U.S. surveys, a full 7% of married adults haven't had sex in the past year. Not once. That's almost 1 out of every 14 couples. Now, this isn't some rare thing, it's the reality for millions of people. And a number like that, well, it should immediately tell you that the popular story of more sex equals more happiness is probably missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Okay, so if a pretty significant number of couples aren't having sex at all, it really makes you wonder, is more always better? This brings us to one of the biggest myths in relationship science. This idea that there's some magic number for sexual frequency that's going to guarantee happiness.
A huge study back in 2015, looking at over 30,000 Americans, pretty much blew this myth right out of the water. What it found was that, yeah, well-being does go up with how often you have sex, but only up to a point. And that point, it's about once a week. Going from having sex less than weekly to weekly, you get a nice little happiness boost. But going from weekly to more than weekly, the needle doesn't move. The benefit just flatlines. So it seems the magic number isn't about hitting some high score, it's more about just maintaining a regular point of connection.
So here's the crucial takeaway. The number of times you have sex isn't the engine that drives a happy relationship. It's actually the other way around. The research shows that sexual satisfaction is an outcome of how satisfied you are with the relationship in general, not the cause of it. A happy, connected relationship is what leads to satisfying sex. Just trying to have more sex isn't going to magically fix a relationship that's already disconnected.
So if just hitting a weekly quota isn't the answer, then what is? Well, it means we need to broaden our definition of intimacy, like way beyond just the physical act of sex. A really strong, resilient partnership is built on multiple pillars of connection. Think of a strong relationship like a table with 4 legs. You've got the physical leg, right? That's your touch and sex. But you also need the emotional leg. That's being vulnerable and really trusting each other. Then there's the psychological leg, connecting over ideas, learning together. And finally, the spiritual leg, sharing a sense of purpose and values. Now, if one of those other legs gets wobbly, especially the emotional one, you can't just lean harder on the physical leg and expect the whole table to stay stable. It just doesn't work that way.
And this right here is the absolute key. As author and therapist Janet McGeever puts it, the pathway to great sexual intimacy is through emotional intimacy and connection. You simply cannot shortcut it. Trying to have amazing physical intimacy without a strong emotional bond is like trying to run a high-performance engine on fumes. It's just not going to get you very far.
But what happens when that emotional foundation gets tested? Because, let's be real, even in the most connected relationships, desire isn't always perfectly in sync. And how you navigate that difference, well, that's where the real work of intimacy happens. It all comes down to communication.
This is called desire discrepancy, and it is one of the most common challenges couples face, period. The most important thing here is to see it not as a sign that your relationship is broken, but as a totally normal dynamic that you just have to navigate together.
And the research on how couples handle this is fascinating. A 2020 study found this really clear divide in how people cope. On one side, you have these solitary strategies, just doing nothing, using distractions, or waiting for the other person to magically change their mind. But on the other side, you've got partnered strategies, talking openly, doing other intimate things like cuddling, or even mutually deciding to have sex anyway. And the results? They were crystal clear. Couples who used those partnered strategies reported way higher relationship and sexual satisfaction. It's not about getting rid of the discrepancy, it's about how you face it together.
But what happens when that disconnection isn't just a temporary thing, when it becomes a long-term reality? Let's talk about the most extreme outcome here, the so-called sexless marriage.
This quote from a user on Reddit, it's just heartbreaking because it's so relatable for so many people. It perfectly captures that quiet reality where there isn't any big anger or fighting, just this slow, silent drift into a platonic friendship where that romantic spark has just gone out.
So why do people stay?
Well, a really revealing survey found that for 47%, that's nearly half of people in sexless marriages, the reason is actually pretty simple. They feel like they have an ideal partner in every other way. The friendship, the support, the life they've built, all those other pillars of intimacy are so strong that they outweigh the lack of a physical one.
And that really brings us to the most crucial point about sexless marriages. As clinical psychologist Dr. Joshua Clappo explains, the lack of sex is rarely the actual core problem. It's almost always a symptom of something deeper: unresolved fights, bad communication, a total loss of that emotional intimacy. And this is why, as he says, a marriage that's failing for other reasons will not be saved by sex.
Okay, so where does all of this leave us? Well, all this data points away from this simple, almost obsessive focus on frequency and toward a much richer, more nuanced understanding of what actually makes a relationship thrive.
All right, let's pull this all together. We've seen that chasing a number is a fool's errand. Happiness totally plateaus around once a week. We've learned that you can't fix a broken relationship in the bedroom because great sex is an outcome of a healthy connection, not the cause of it. It all comes down to building a bond on all four of those pillars of intimacy and using open communication, not silence, to get through the tough spots. Because at the end of the day, sex can't be a bandage for a wound it didn't create.
So ultimately, everything we've talked about pushes us to ask a totally different and frankly, more important question. It's not how often, it's how connected. The goal isn't just to be physically active, it's to be emotionally present. So the final thought I want to leave you with is this. Are you focused on building true, multifaceted intimacy? Or are you just counting the days on a calendar?